I never knew how important selling my ideas would be. So think about that and think about how to distill complex ideas down into something really tangible that everyone can get really excited about.
We've had to go take visits to toilet companies that make some of our adhesives and basically go check by check and seeing every part of their process and figure out how do we troubleshoot some of our problems.
I really enjoy my work-life balance in my current job. With that being said, I think it really depends on what group, like your experience could be different wherever you are.
I think maybe then the most important skill might have been just failing, like having the ability to fail.
I can promise all of you that we fail somehow every single day. And part of our company is to always continuously improve.
Today on Science with Impact.
I'm Vanessa Rosa. I'm the founder of QVET Collective, director of Monet's Broader Impacts, and the host of the Science with Impact podcast. My goal is to dedicate my career to helping research scientists like yourselves and industry scientists as well broaden the societal impacts of their work.
Hi, everyone. Zach Keene. I'm currently a research scientist at Dow Chemical. I'm at the Midland, Michigan site. I am in the chemical science division of core R&D. We do new chemistry, new polymers, new catalysts, organic synthesis. So we're like the front end chemists of the company. Core a little bit more fundamental than some of the more customer facing roles. I grew up in Florida, did my undergrad at University of Florida with Ken Wagner, did my PhD with Steve Craig, and then I did a postdoc at Northwestern for a couple of years before coming to Dow. But Dow, I get to still apply things I learned in Steve's lab. People come to me for mechanistic questions about their products and things like that, and lucky to be able to still keep doing the things that I love there. So that's what I do.
I'm Erin Finley. I manage the solid state lab, and I also manage a metrology group where I have two jobs. One job manages all the equipment and all of their calibrations and their maintenance, and then my other group performs method validation, and we work with our process development group on investigation and characterization of our products. So I work for the Pharmaceutical Services Division of Thermo Fisher Scientific, and we produce drug substances. So the part of the drug, when you take a pill, we make the stuff that makes you actually feel better. We're well known for making Tamiflu. So if anybody's taken Tamiflu, we've probably made that for you. So we try to keep people better. We make a lot of oncology drugs. And so the focus of the chemistry that I do is understanding its crystal structure, its particle size, and other properties about its physical state, largely to make sure that it can sit on the shelf and then your body can take it and absorb it properly. And I've been doing this for about 6.5 years now. I graduated from the University of Houston with expertise in particle size engineering and X-ray diffraction.
Hey everyone, I'm Cameron Brown. I work at Eastman Chemical at our Kingsport, Tennessee site. I lead the applications research group within our coatings, adhesives, sealants, and elastomers business. We're basically the group that is in charge of trying to understand fundamentally our applications that our business is interested in. I also have a couple of individual contributor responsibilities still, as well as I lead our data digitization and AI machine learning efforts. So for undergrad, I went to University of Georgia. Then went to Duke, actually Steve Craig's lab, same as Zach. And I've been with Eastman. It's my first job out of grad school, so about 7 years now.
Hi, everyone. My name's Danielle Whittick. I work for Under Armour. I'm an apparel designer there, so I probably have the most obscure position out of anyone here on the panel. I actually came across some of the research that Stephen's group was doing a few years ago because I've spent half of my career within the innovation space in apparel design for various brands, and part of my job is to go out and connect with researchers on determining if some of the things that are being created in other fields could be applied to apparel and footwear. So I appreciate being kept in the loop as all the research progresses, and I'm excited to be a part of the panel today.
I saved Nick for last intentionally, not because he's not important, but because he is a Monet alumni.
Thanks, Vanessa. And it's nice to see some familiar names. So my name's Nick. I work for a company called Hoya Vision Care as part of their Advanced Technology Center. So that's in Ramsey, Minnesota. So my position, I'm a senior scientist here, mainly focused on adhesive developments as well as method developments and trying to make basically experiments that can translate understanding of material properties into understanding basically like lifetime performance for these materials out in the field. And like Vanessa said, I was actually part of Monet not so long ago. I got my PhD from the University of Minnesota with Mark Hillmeyer and Tim Lodge. But then I went to Duke University to work with Steve for my postdoc. And I'm happy to be part of the panel today.
Thank you so much, panelists. You'll see that most of our trainees are working with polymer networks and gels. A pretty good percentage are interested in research and development roles in industry. And you'll notice that a big chunk over here are undecided. So no pressure, industry panel, you might be the deciding factor. Here's what they really hope to gain. So the majority are hoping to understand different industry career paths. They're looking for networking strategies and professional relationship building. And I'll say the other two, so industry job search tactics and interview preparation, and learning about the transition process between academia and industry. If you could describe your career path.
So in grad school, I worked with like pharmaceutical polymers, light scattering. Postdoc, it's as part of working with more materials, more like network fundamentals. And then during industry, it's turned into more trying to better understand how polymers are basically processed and things like economics and practicality. And so I think that it's just an understanding of basically how multifaceted I think the translation of academia into industry world really is and how many different skill sets that it involves.
I would say on that note, it might be something that you're not even thinking of. And the reason that I made the connection with this group is because someone was willing to pick up my phone call to email me back. And I would say that was the case with about 4 different universities that were also working within this mechanophore space. And we had the opportunity to explore what could be maybe something that they weren't initially thinking of at the time. A lot of the focus normally is around like the medical field or automobiles or aircrafts. And so to think about maybe like a women's legging or a running sneaker allowed us both to get out of our comfort zone and think about what could be. And I appreciated the opportunity to have that conversation with someone, which led me to being here today and hopefully leads to something more in the future. So always be willing to just keep your mind open and figuring out if there could be alternative applications to the work that you're doing.
So I've always been someone that has a wide variety of interests in things, and it's been super challenging for me to narrow down what hobby do I want to do or what do I want to do with my life. And so because of that, I just go with the flow and then whatever happens, happens. So I explored a ton of different possibilities while I was in Steve's lab, a couple of industry positions, postdocs, academic research, academic teaching. I even got a job offer from a law firm to be a patent agent. Something about Eastman's offer was really interesting to me. It's more of a fundamentals type role in industry. And so that's the best of both worlds. Getting to still do some research, but also going into the industrial setting.
So I'm probably the only person that's not a polymer person here. It doesn't mean that we don't work on polymers here at the site. We actually do make reagents that are polymers. And so I think my path, I actually started out as in graduate school as like a hardcore, like inorganic solid state chemist. So I put minerals together and watched them glow in the dark, which couldn't be like further from what I do now. I think the takeaway message from my path is that the skills that you're learning as a PhD can be really applied to any career that you want to do. If you love being a bench chemist, that's wonderful. But if you love analyzing your data and not so much making your material, you can go do that path. We often hire people with a lot of skills that have nothing to do with the work that we're actually doing. And I just think that's a really important message, that you're learning more now than you actually maybe see yourself as being useful in doing going forward in the future.
Essentially, when I was graduating from Steve's lab, thinking about where to go, ultimately, I think I went to Northwestern partially because I remember looking at different groups and looking at different sites and trying to get a sense of where people would end up. And I wasn't quite ready to make a decision, industry, academia, but I just liked what I saw in terms of, I don't know, the companies, the opportunities where alumni went in terms of Northwestern's network and things like that. And so I thought that it would provide me from the basis to access whatever I wanted to do once I kicked the can down the road a couple more years and figured it out. And then when I started working, some of my other postdoc buddies got jobs at Dow and learned a little bit about it. I funneled some information back. I started getting a sense of what they did, thought it was interesting. They thought I would like it. And then when I interviewed, it was very much, I was really impressed by the people that I met and the diversity of career paths. There are people that I still work with that work for 35 years and still do glove box work and make catalysts and have probably run 250,000 reactions in their lives. And there's also people that stay in lab for a couple years and then go to leadership or be technical leaders, write proposals, whatever. It's just very diverse. And so I guess it was then another case of kicking the can down the road and saying, I can come here and then still be able to figure out what I want to do when I grow up after that. Yeah.
To kicking cans. I love it. What does it take to bridge academic research and real world impact?
Okay, I can start because I already wrote something down. So I'm actually I guess I'll give an anecdote. So I'm at a Gordon conference right now, and I was talking to a professor earlier who was working on compatibilizers for polymer recycling. And they told me, okay, yeah, we do this and we measure these mechanical properties and this and that. And that kind of started a conversation where I was like, from what I understand, if you're going to recycle those two polymers, really the big issue isn't like the ultimate mechanical properties, is the thing you make when you blend it all together that's strong enough. It's can you process that thing? And the processing step is really the limitation. And so I think it's like moments like that where I don't know if processing is on brand for this professor, right? I don't know if processing is something he wants to go down, but that is the problem, right? And so if you really want to solve that problem that you're working on, that's not criticism. He's asking great questions and he's asking the right questions to the right people. But at that point, you have to decide, are we going to actually do translational development or are we going to leave a gap between what we do and what industry does? And the bigger the gap you leave, the higher the barrier for industry to pick that up and de-risk it themselves or to fund more money to develop it. So I think being accepting the reality of even sometimes the problem isn't the problem that you want to solve or isn't on brand or whatever. If you really are passionate about that, and you don't have to be, that doesn't have to be the sole goal of the academic endeavor. But if you really want to do that, I think you need to really embrace the reality of the problems and where they exist and solving them from a real world perspective.
Yeah, I think on that, when you're in graduate school, you have the ability to seek out your own research interest. And so you can find problems and dive into them to find a solution. Where in industry, particularly where I work, the problems are presented to us and we have to find the solution. So at the end of the day, you're really just using your problem solving skills that you learned as a graduate student. I'll use just this one real quick example because it hits home for me in terms of like real world impact. As a young graduate student in first and second year, I spent hours of my life on particle size analysis. I hated it so much that I refused to do it after a while and got my own little army of undergrads to do it for me. It turns out that's actually like what I do now for a living. And yes, I've hired people to do it for me because I still don't like it, but I'm very good at it, which is why I do it. But when I see a project that we have, a drug that comes to us, and I get to help them solve that particle sizing problem, which is critical to formulation of drugs, the interactions between the excipients and the actual drug substance. And it matters so much how those particles are shaped and what their sizes are. And I get to be a part of that and then see that become successful and see it really heal people in the real world.
I love that. So applying it to real world and getting to see the actual consequences of your work all the way through.
Yeah. The first time it happened, I was like, I think I might have even cried. I was so excited.
I think listening is key. Getting out there, talking to people and just listening to what the actual problems are and trying to narrow it down to what you can do about it. And typically that's understanding some sort of structural property relationship or something like that. Most things in industry are so complicated that not one company or one person or one experiment is going to do much or solve anything. And so if you want to make like your own little slice of impact, try to talk to as many people as you can, see what the actual important problems are, and then try to narrow it down to some kind of relationship that you can then develop a hypothesis around and test. And then once you do that, make sure you publish it, write it, and talk to other people. Because if you don't publish it or talk to other people about it, then no one's going to know.
Yeah, I agree with you, Cameron. I think because I studied fashion design in school, the transition has been very straightforward for me. This is what I studied. This is what I'm doing. But I think some of the things that make you coming to school, keeping some of that childlike curiosity is so important. I think we're all really eager to be experts in our field. And this is the youngest you'll ever be, ever in your whole life. And there's a benefit to that. You're not overly jaded. You're not overly influenced by your coworkers or the community that you're in yet. You're not sucked into the corporate environment. And I think there's a huge pro to that. You're coming in with fresh eyes. So use that to your advantage and stay curious. And then to Cameron's point earlier on really speaking about the work that you're doing, I never knew how important selling my ideas would be. So think about that and think about how to distill complex ideas down into something really tangible that everyone can get really excited about. Because whether you're trying to get approval to do some work at this new company that you're working for, or sell yourself on getting this job that you're going after, or even trying to build a team to execute a project, it's just so important to have that skill set. So it's really important to not be so far down in the weeds and get people excited about what you're doing. On a side note, I've listened to this podcast recently that it's called Diary of a CEO. And this one episode, maybe Vanessa, then you saw this one, the interview with Vin Gang, I think is his name. He's a public speaker, a magician. He has some really great tips on how to just use these simple things, simple tricks throughout your day in your communication that really just helps people connect with you. And I think that's just a really important skill set to have.
So is this the episode you're referring to, Danielle?
Yeah, that's it.
Yay. Okay, so I'll put it in the chat.
I think a lot of this is echoing what other panelists have already said, but I think it's some understanding of the different priorities, I think, that are in academia versus industry. Academia, you're looking for questions that are interesting, along with those that have interesting answers that can eventually be published and you can talk about it at conferences and things. But in industry, it's very much about what is the most convenience or sometimes economic ways to address challenges. And more than that, what are things that you can easily communicate with people who are actually executing these things? And I think that something Danielle brought up is this need for communication skills, because you're going to be working with a ton of different types of people. Directly, you might be working with a technical team, but the people who are actually going to be doing the execution, it might be with the operations team. So maybe they're not chemists or even scientists, perhaps they're engineers. So you have to do a very good job of understanding what your background is, but also what their background is as well, and figure out what's the best way to communicate with them and to sell, whether you're trying to improve. So you try to make a new material or something, but to be able to cleanly communicate those ideas to different types of people.
How are technical skills in academia translated into a rewarding industry career?
Yeah, I think some of this comes back to communication to a degree. Like one aspect of this is, of course, being able to analyze data, but I think the even more important aspect is that you've done a really cool experiment that is important for some aspect of your company, is that you have to be able to communicate that either through conversation or slides. And so you have to be able to communicate the results of experiments is one aspect. Another aspect, though, is leaning more on the technical side of this. And it's just recognizing how important it is to be able to do method development. So for instance, I've had situations where my company has an instrument. No one's really used it before because it can be complicated and because they got it 10 years ago and that's just the work instructions just don't exist for that instrument. But for you to be able to come from an academia background is know the fundamentals of certain instruments and basically how it should work, is for you to be able to walk up to it, use that instrument, and then more so be able to write up instructions for that other people can use it as well after you. I think that's hugely important.
I hear that. So allowing the paths for other people. And that's something that I think academia does really well. That's translatable to industry.
I think where I've seen this be like really successful is coming in and trying to solve some problems with those technical skills. And this might already be happening if you're working with any other industries for internships or on different projects. We've actually hired a few people that were most recently engineers at the University of Delaware that were helping me on a project of building like a soft tissue dress form. And this was really out of the box for many of these students, where we were really analyzing the science behind breast movement and mimicking this in a dress form, recreating it and make it be something as a usable tool that we can use in-house. And it was great. It was successful. And I felt like the partnership and the energy that we got from some of the students was so memorable. And I really appreciated the commitment to the project, that when there was a job opportunity that came up in what we call the proving ground. So they test a lot of the products that we make. They make different testing protocols. One of the students was applying for a job there, and I advocated for him. Another person also advocated for him of, yes, please, like, he's great with collaborating with others. He's optimistic, upbeat, and can really think out of the box when we're trying to apply his foundation in engineering to sportswear, to footwear. And that's exactly what we need, because that's not something that we even knew we needed in the past. But because we were able to cross paths during that project, an opportunity for him came about. So hopefully that answers your question, but that's the story that I had thought about when I read that.
I love the storytelling aspect, and knowing that Under Armour pays special attention to the ways different body parts move in their clothes just makes me want to get more of it.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I go back again to this sticking with a deep understanding, fundamentals, having that be your foundation, because if that's the case, then you can translate it to lots of different applications. For example, coming out of Steve's lab, one of the first projects I worked on at Eastman was designing polyester resins for kit coatings that go inside of canned food. And you have to pretty much coat a flat panel, deform it into a can. So you got a lot of mechanical stress on a coating, and you fill it with food. It has different chemistries in there that could attack your coating. You heat it up and retort it, so there's thermal stress, and it's got to sit on the shelf for a couple of years for aging stress. So being able to look at that whole problem in general, talking to a bunch of people, understanding what the actual problems are, and then relating them back to a fundamental question and trying to figure out a structured body relationship, like how does the network put together? Like, how do you form the network that can survive this kind of stuff? What kind of chemistry do you need your backbone to consist of?
Going off of what Nick said, my entire job is actually method development. And then the other part of my job is taking care of the equipment. So I think if you're thinking about like your technical skills, none of my bench skills translated into my industry career. But the fact that I could walk up to an X-ray diffractometer and run it immediately with very little training, and then basically manage its entire life, which is what I do, is truly important. And that skill has actually translated into my ability to manage and oversee the people that work on every other type of instrument that we have here, from GCs to LCs to mass specs to the NMRs. I think if you want to think about your actual like putting molecules together, that's one way to have a technical career. I think the other thing to think about is the equipment side of it, which is what I do. And as a graduate student, we were responsible for a piece of equipment. We had to bring it back to life, get it running, work with the vendors to do all of that. And because I was able to do that, I was able to bring that with me and actually expand my career into doing something else that I love, which is taking care of the equipment. So I get to be an instrument person, and I get to still do my chemistry that I love too. When I think about doing something that's rewarding from a technical perspective, I took the one niche thing that really had nothing to do with my PhD, and I was actually able to translate that into a part of my career that I truly do love to do.
Yeah, so I guess I'll echo Cameron, most likely. That's probably a common theme, that the skills I came in with, I actually use them directly. I guess this is very different from Erin. Pretty much, I don't sonicate polymers, but other than that, like I all of the tools that I used to develop in grad school, like I use, but not in a contrived way. It's just there turns out to be that where I landed, there are problems in radical chemistry and radical curing and polymer networks and things like that. So that was just fortuitous. So that's a little bit boring in my case, because I don't think you can like necessarily control your career path to the extent that you're working on problems that are that similar. Having said that, it's still not the same problems, right? It's a matter of how I solve the problems and the tools I use versus what the problems are themselves, right? So the context still does change. And so, again, going back to Cameron's point on the fundamentals, having some foundational knowledge and baseline problem solving skills are really important to that and important to being able to succeed regardless of what the context of the problems are. And I think maybe then the most important skill might have been just failing, like having the ability to fail. And I think Steve let me fail and let me spend a lot of time doing different things and trying new things and failing. And that kind of little bit of random walk and iterating, it lets you try different things and it builds those problem solving skills that I think Nick and Erin talked about, because ultimately you're going to go and work in something different. And if you don't spend time trying and failing and learning how to figure things out, then that's really like the most valuable part of hiring PhDs and why we hire PhDs. I think there's a lot of things people can do without a PhD, but it's just having the expectation that you have training in being your head against the wall, being creative and coming up with a solution.
I love that. And I hope for every graduate student here that gives some hope that your failures aren't meaningless and
No, fail
will
fail
serve
more.
you.
People are risk averse, and especially I think with COVID, some people had a very limited time to go into lab and succeed and get something done. So fail, please. Yeah.
I just want to jump in. And so the site that I work at is contract manufacturing. I can promise all of you that we fail somehow every single day. And part of our company is to always continuously improve. And yeah, gosh, that's where you learn it all, is by getting it wrong 1,800 times before you get it right.
That's so great. So tell all your senior investigators that you've been told to fail more. What was the most significant change in the way you do research transitioning from academia to industry?
I think, I guess for me, and this is maybe a personal thing, I was never patient, and Cameron probably remembers that maybe I'm not the most patient person, but I was never super patient. And I think the time scale at which sometimes you can work on problems, in my job, we work on some big problems, some problems that have been around for a while. And sometimes you need to go slow and maybe de-risk a small part of it with a little bit of resources and then come back, broaden that out and broaden that out. And that is an issue of time scale, where I think when you're in training in academia, at least, I think PIs do this, obviously, but I think as a grad student, you don't get through many cycles to iterate like that and understand that you can slow down and do a little bit in kind of this bin in this time period, and then make another choice about what makes sense and slowly stack that up. And then also just, I think, being more, just intentional and patient about things in general. I think I had a lot of colleagues that had very different ways of doing things. And I tried to just take, when I felt like I didn't do the best job, I tried to just see how they did things. Or even if someone was paying and I didn't agree with them at the time, I would listen. And sometimes I thought back and I was like, oh, maybe I should have listened a little bit more. Maybe they had a point, and just try to take that kind of feedback of those lessons. And yeah, for me, it was mostly about slowing down a little bit and working on more of the time scale that you can get things done here, and just working on more things, but slower.
It sounds, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we're looking to optimize having more chances to fail more quickly to learn
Oh yeah,
faster.
for sure. And just like throwing more at it quickly isn't practical, and the practical reasons, but also I think it just makes sense that you might not do that in our environment.
So I think for me, the hardest lesson that I had to learn was that in contract work, we have client has asked us to do something very specific for them, and we do not have the luxury of traveling down rabbit holes. And so we have to stay focused on what the goal of the projects are, because we have deliverables that have to be done by specific dates, because we're driven by manufacturing timelines. And so I think learning how to work in very restricted scopes of work and understanding what's outside of the scope of work, and then knowing how to do that in a very specific amount of time. So learning how to contract the amount of work that you're doing, and realizing that you don't have to test 5 different variable conditions. You can do 3 and that's enough. So learning those things, I think really adjusting to like very specific scopes of work, and then making the decisions of what needs to be done and what needs to go, and doing it quickly.
I'm speaking to another scientist about the concept of scope creep. And I hadn't known what scope creep was until I was in industry myself. But hearing it now, could totally recognize scope creep in academia. So for anybody who doesn't know, scope creep is where you define an objective and then it expands. And
Yeah,
you
and clients are the worst. They will
Yes.
they will scope creep themselves and then be like, you already did it, and so why do we have to pay for it? So there's a lot of challenges with it. So you have to make sure that, like, I never do anything outside of the scope of work without telling the client that I have to talk with business management about the scope of the work, because ultimately business management's going to decide if we're going to charge for it or not. But I cross that T. I don't do it because it can get very quickly out of hand.
My clients are in the call, and so I'll tell you they're perfect and they never creep their scope. Moving on, how about Cameron?
I work at a pretty large company. I thought in grad school I was pretty collaborative, but it's like nothing compared to working at Eastman or probably Dow or other large chemical companies. I do a lot of the work myself, even when I was an individual contributor. Like I may make a resin or two, but I also have a couple of technicians working with me that make a lot more things that I'm responsible for. And then characterizing it, we have a whole analytical division that specializes in their own instrument. So if I want a GPC, I got to submit it through our LIMS system, and then it goes to the GPC lab, and then they run the analysis and bring it back to me. So every test is like that, except for the truly special ones. And even then, we have like specialty analytical people that kind of design methods and whatnot. And after I would make a resin or something, then it would go into a paint. And so we have AD formulation people that then make a paint out of it, make cure panels, run tests, and they have lots of technicians or whatever working with them. So the amount of people they are working with day in and day out is pretty huge. The amount of data that comes to you is not always generated by, most likely not generated by you. So having to navigate that, I think, is a bit challenging in the beginning, but you get used to it. And then the second point about working in a large company is the bureaucracy expands as people expands. And so it might seem trivial or easy, like just submitting a test. It could take a while to even get approval to do that, like for the system to even accept you. But sometimes we contract out some of our synthesis to like smaller companies, and I'm amazed at like how quickly they can do things. Like I have a resin being made in Italy, and they just do all the tests, like the scientist does all the tests themselves and gives it to me, and then it's okay, it'll take 2 weeks to get all this back from my end because it's like all these other people I got to work with to get all this stuff.
That's an interesting idea, is that your collaborators don't become limited to your lab, or even in this case, to your research center. There's collaborators all over who are contracted within the company. I imagine that the pros and cons of that level of degree of collaboration are interesting to navigate.
Yeah, it's supposed to be more efficient. One GPC lab, they're supposed to be efficient, but then if you have a lot of people submitting at one time, then it could be more efficient just for me to run it.
It's funny because when I talk to other creatives, a question that I get is, how do you wait so long? How do you stay focused over such a long period of time? Because most of us are working within an 18-month calendar to create product. One of my more successful innovations took about 3 years to create. Now, on the research side, the university side, it's a totally different conversation because it's the same amount of time that we finish, but we have to have this chat about we do not have unlimited time and we do not have unlimited money. And it's really difficult when everything starts moving and changing and shifting, and everybody here spoke to that. So we all feel it, whether you're on the industry side or on the research side. And it's trying to just stay focused. And we actually call it the North Star. Maybe you've heard of that and use that term as well. But I feel like the deck, the PowerPoint that I created in the beginning of a project, we have to continually revisit that and bring everybody back. Yes, we found some really cool ideas. Let's shelve that for now. Maybe we have a 2.0 version. If this ends up being really successful, we have the opportunity to revisit it and build on that idea. So it really is trying to maybe leave some of the stuff that you're picking up along the way and get to the meat of the project and to be able to hit your timeline, because there's so many other partners in play. For instance, Under Armour will have the entire marketing team looped in from the beginning that's capturing everything that we're doing from start to finish, so that when we're able to launch a product, it's this holistic story that's really rich in information. So everybody's lined up waiting for maybe this 2025 launch. It's really difficult when things start to shift and alter along the way.
Oh, that's so interesting because now it's not just the number of collaborators and the degree to which you're collaborating, but you're also collaborating across departments. So you're considering marketing and wow, that's wild. North Star is an interesting concept. I should start integrating that.
Yeah, I think that one big change that I went through is especially working for a somewhat smaller company in graduate school and also to some degree during the postdoc. You have different individuals in the groups as well as your PI that you can talk to, and everyone knows a lot about, in my case, polymers, and relatively knows what you're working on. But in industry, a lot of times you very well are the subject matter expert. And so you have to have a very good understanding of course, the projects that you're working on and be able to communicate that to other people. Um, the other aspect I think that was a big change though too was in grad school, you're able to babysit your samples, your projects. A lot of times, at least if you're the primary head of a project, you're able to follow it step by step, be involved every step. You're confident that everything was processed and done correctly. A lot of times in industry though, you have to send it off to people, whether it's a toller, other departments. In some ways, it's really interesting because it forces you to have a really good understanding of other processes that you might not be there directly for. But it really involves a lot of subtleties that perhaps you don't think about. For instance, we do a lot of extrusion. So it's what are the pressures that are being used? What are the solid contents? Is a filter being used in this? And so you're able to have a better understanding of, especially if you're doing like product developments, what the end results are. You have to have a really good understanding of everything that led to those results. And so it forces you to branch out maybe further than you might have expected to.
Is that shared ownership, Nick, ever scary?
I don't think so. I think that though it really makes you have to put yourself in a different place. So for instance, I've done a lot of product developments at Hoya. And so we've had to go take visits to toilet companies that make some of our adhesives and basically go check by check and seeing every part of their process and figure out how do we troubleshoot some of our problems. And so it gives you an opportunity to really see a lot of processes that you might not be exposed to otherwise.
What was or was not effective in your job search process?
Yeah, I'm a little bit boring with this part because a lot of my job search processes have very much been like the LinkedIn, the Indeeds, being able to pick positions that were either positions that like were doing work that I was interested in and or locations that I would really prefer. But I will say, of course, is that the typical try to utilize your connections, especially being in academia for people as part of the Monet Center, is really try to, especially for as part of collaborations, as part of conferences, make sure you talk to people. And I think that having people within companies, especially if you're a certain companies that you're really interested in, having some connections within those companies is a huge help because I think that especially the HR processes, they can be relatively opaque, and having someone on the inside that can push your name forward, I think can really improve your chances for getting an offer.
Given that you're a Monet alumni, can you give us an example of what it looks like to leverage your network within Monet in a strong way?
As part of Monet, I know that Monet has a lot of commercial partners. And a lot of course, Monet has a fundamental networks aspect of it, but a lot of these are industrial relevance, especially when you start going into interviews, they're going to ask you, basically coming from academia, how comfortable are you to take this position in industry? And so if you can easily answer that such that you can say, I work on industrial relevant projects, or if you can say that have these commercial partners, I think that really can make you stand out to others who are also coming from grad school or coming from postdocs.
Yeah, like networking is such an ick word. Even when I graduated, which was like 20 years ago, I hated the idea of networking. I still hate it. And then I realized that it's really just being curious about other people and just chatting. Like when you're out somewhere, when you're at an event, whether it's a conference, whether it's at school or anywhere, it could be in the supermarket, just getting comfortable with chatting and sharing ideas and being curious, I think is the most important thing. You never know where those relationships lead. When I left school, I probably applied for 200 jobs and didn't hear back from anyone. And I ended up getting a connection through someone's random sister at like a friend of a friend that was in the industry and had a job opening. And I just took it and it just got me going. And so I would also say that just consider every opportunity. It might not be like exactly what you were dreaming of, but I think there's always an opportunity to learn. So if you step into it with some enthusiasm and just take it for what it is, you might realize that it leads you somewhere you didn't even know that you were going. I think a lot of the big shifts in my career happened because there were people in my life that saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. Even getting into innovation, I was applying for a completely different job, and the creative director had this other opening and was like, "What do you think about doing apparel innovation?" Which sounded absolutely terrifying, but just jumped into it. And it was one of the most fulfilling things I've ever done in my life. Never did I think that getting into the field of fashion design that I would be solving problems and working with scientists and chemists and biomechanists. And this whole world opened up for me. Just keep your options open, keep it light, keep it fun. We're all on this planet at the same time, and that's cool. It doesn't have to be so heavy and serious.
I love the idea that networking doesn't have to be so transactional. I think that's what makes it icky. Is that when we're just getting to know people for the very idea of potentially leveraging that connection to get a job, it doesn't feel natural because it's not. Being able to take the time to just get to know people, that sounds really valuable.
Yeah, not to sound like a broken record, but yeah, that basically sums it up. It's your network. I'm not a big fan of applying to just a bunch of jobs because I think that's a waste of time. Every job that I got an interview for, I knew someone or someone knew somebody who knew somebody. This job here, like Steve, happened to know a scientist that knew the hiring manager here. Once I got on, a couple of years later, another hiring manager I knew, he was looking for a very specific person. He was looking for someone. We have like this high purity business where we're selling into the semiconductor industry. So he's looking for someone with a PhD and also maybe had worked at a semiconductor type company. And I happen to know someone that went to Duke that before he went to Duke was from Taiwan and worked at TSMC. I happened to be talking to him. He's like, "Hey, I applied to this a couple of months ago, never heard anything back. And come to find out, resume was never passed along to the hiring director because the algorithm filtered them out." So, and once I passed him along to the hiring manager, this is exactly what I'm looking for. I don't know why this was not all the words are here. I don't know what's going on, but yeah, it's so and just, as Danielle said, you just be curious and like, just talk to as many people as you can and don't talk to them for the sake of just getting a job because you're really interested in who they are and learning.
I love that because we're seeing the different approaches, right? Because you can apply hundreds of jobs, and that's a good strategy if you're not connected in industry. And then once you get those roles going, you can build your network that way. Or if you're already connected in industry through some means, you can leverage those connections.
As a hiring manager, I can say that the PhD position that I just filled, I had over 60 applicants within 2 weeks that did not require visa support. Every single person that I interviewed for that role, with the exception of one, actually reached out directly to me on LinkedIn. So I posted the job and they were messaging me their resumes directly. I would strongly encourage anybody to not be afraid. If you see a hiring manager or a recruiter actively posting a job, please just feel free to message them your resume, largely because the AI bots can sometimes, like Cameron said, accidentally remove somebody who's actually perfectly qualified for the role. And I would also say one thing that I did learn being in this role is the concept of an informational interview. So if you go to a conference and you see an industry person give a talk, don't be afraid to get their card afterwards or get their email address and then say, "Hey, can I have 30 minutes? I'm really interested in the kind of work that you do. I'm thinking about transitioning into industry after graduate school. And I just have some questions about what it is to be in your job." That's a great way to network building with it being very low pressure, and you get to understand a role, a person better. And then maybe when you're ready to go, you can send them an email and be like, "Hey, do you know anybody who knows somebody?" So that's my advice.
I really like the do you know anybody approach. I've found that we all kind of want to help each other and we know how hard this job search thing is. And so, do you know anybody is so much better than can I work for you?
Yeah, and you would actually be surprised by, I've had people email me and say, hey, or message me on LinkedIn and be like, hey, I saw you at this conference, or I saw you posted this job. I'm not really doing that, but I'm trying to get into this company. And I've been able to pass their resumes directly on to hiring managers. So yeah, you have to take an approach of, just because they're not hiring for you doesn't mean they don't know somebody who could be.
Zach, what was or wasn't effective about your job search process?
So I guess I also don't want to sound like a broken record. I think I already described it in my first answer. I think I do have a couple things to say along those lines. And then I think one of them actually segues into Claire's question. The first was, and I guess this relates to what you asked Nick in terms of leveraging like the Monet network. And Cameron reminds me saying, but Cameron got a job before he could come, but like I helped Cameron like line up an interview at Dow back then, right? So that's just how that works. And that's how it works for a lot of people, right? And that's your natural network. And that is, I think, by and large, even if it's Danielle's friend of a cousin's uncle, sister thing, then that's just how it works for a lot of people. Echo the authentic networking, right? Like interacting with people based on actual genuine interest in what they do. And then that kind of drives the rest of it. Before I go to the Claire relevant question, I think I did want to say to everyone, I mean, like for instance, Dow's a big company, right? And so I see the machinery behind the amount of people we look at, the amount of people we think about interviewing, people that come in and don't succeed. And one thing I always want people to know, because sometimes it breaks my heart when people interview and they don't get the job, is that there's just so many factors. It's so complicated at a company like Dow or DuPont, 3M. There's so many factors. Maybe someone came and filled that spot 3 days earlier just because there was a storm where you're at and you couldn't fly out that day. And that's just how that works. So if you go out for a job and you don't get it, never think it means that you weren't qualified or people didn't think you could do the job or would be great at the job. There's just so many other factors. If there's feedback that you can take to improve, then take that, but don't take that as an indicator that you weren't good enough. So I just always want people to know that. And then maybe to jump into Claire's question, I guess I'd preface by saying that when I go out and I meet folks that I think I could bring into, quite often I will follow up with them and keep some relationship for some amount of years before they're ready to interview.
Once you're trying to build your network, like what is the best way to like keep those connections? Because then it's like easy to just add them on LinkedIn, et cetera. But then
Yeah.
also once you have them, like when you're in the job saying like, I don't want the people to feel like I'm trying to use them or anything. Like so I don't know how to, how do you even be like, hey, I see there's this job.
I think like you have to build, I think building some amount of like genuine interest and credibility helps, right? The way it happens for me is I'm going to be at a conference or I'm going to be at a university and I have a conversation with someone. Generally, they come up to me because they're interested in what I do. And I go, okay, hey, if you want to talk sometime, we can set up a meeting and just talk more about what you do, what I do. And then if they make the effort to do that, to me, that's like a bit of an indicator that they're also spending their time. And most people don't end up doing that. So if they do, that's a first step, right? To go and even spend a little bit of your own time, not just the convenient time. I think that's the thing. Like for me, it's not transactional, but it's a little bit of a filter. It's easy to walk up to someone while they're at a conference talking about jobs and be like, oh, hey, can I get a job or talk to you about your job? But actually going home and thinking about it more and thinking about what you want to do and being serious that maybe you're interested in doing that and reaching out and spending some time, that's a good indicator and a good way to build an authentic connection. I do that with people. And then when it comes up, maybe I'll put a note and I'll reach out, hey, are you interviewing? But there's definitely been people that I've brought on where we had a job open up and I knew they were interviewing. Let them know that there were other options within the company if things didn't work out in what they had interviewed for. Yeah, I do that kind of actively. And I think just being authentic and putting some of your own time into it and not just interacting when it's convenient or at the moment where you need the thing that benefits you, right? That's all.
Okay, thanks.
So when I go on to LinkedIn or whatever else, I keep seeing all these posts about needing to know AI or basically you're going to get replaced. It's a bit alarmist, but essentially that. But yeah, so I was mostly just wondering if Cameron or anybody else has any input on where you see AI going in the chemical sciences. and how you recommend that graduate students position themselves successfully to just like harness AI for research and or not eventually be replaced by AI.
Yes, I wouldn't be too concerned about being replaced by AI in the at least the short term, probably medium term as well. I think when people talk about AI, there's two things. There's like the ChatGPT type thing, and then there's like machine learning. Both of those, I think, require experts to interpret those results or to build those models. So that's why I always harp on going back to the fundamentals. I've created a lot of AI models or machine learning models, I should say. They're somewhat helpful if you have a really well-defined system. You don't go too far outside of it, and you can build in fundamental structure property relationships within those models. That's just statistics, really. So you can get the same information, at least what I'm using right now, using a designed experiment or other statistical methods. I'm not too big on that in the short term, I would say. As far as the ChatGPT AI side of things, I think that's super helpful for clarifying your thoughts or trying to understand things that you already know about. So, if there's something you learned about in grad school, undergrad, you could ask, hey, whatever, there's this relationship. Can you explain it to me in a different way? But you need to be careful because they can make things up sometimes. So you need to already be an expert and kind of filter away some of the BS that it provides you. Yeah, I think, again, going back to the fundamentals, if you really understand the fundamentals, it's going to be really hard for AI to replace you right now because you're working with that to help you go faster, not necessarily. It's just going to provide some magic answer to you because there's no magic to it. With that being said, I do talk to VPs and directors all the time. This, hey, can AI just solve this for us? And I'm always like, no, it can't.
Hi, everybody. So I was talking with a different career panel some months ago, and a really interesting point that was brought up was the question of what do you want to make room for in your life? What does that look like in academia? What does that look like in industry and navigating, deciding between those two? There's not necessarily the wrong answer, but maybe there's, okay, I want to make room for my kids. My kids are whatever. Say that you have a family and you're like, okay, I want to be at X, Y, and Z event, and I can't do that if I'm in industry because of X, Y, and Z. How do you think that being in industry has allowed you or not allowed you to make space for certain things in your life, and how do you go about navigating that?
I find this question to be really important. I find for me that I have a lot more job flexibility with my personal life versus having been in graduate school. Like I work 50 hours a week and then that's it. Like I do not come to lab on a Saturday. I do not run reactions overnight. I do now that like our process chemists, our organic chemists upstairs, they have to work a little bit different just because that's just how chemistry is when you're on a bench. But even at that, vacation is vacation. I'm not answering emails when I'm on vacation. I'm not taking phone calls when I'm on vacation. So I think for me, industry has afforded me the ability to really delineate my personal life from my professional life. And I feel really good about making that and being able to turn my work over to my team in my absence. And I can just make sure it gets done while I'm gone and I don't have to worry about it. I feel as an academic, I didn't have as much freedom to make those decisions. Now, as a graduate student, so maybe when you're a professor, it's a little bit different, but
I've heard it only gets worse. But I
I
wouldn't
also
know personally.
never have to write another grant ever again, which is the real joy of my life. I write a lot, just no grant. But
Wonderful. Does anyone else have a response for Anthony?
Yeah, I can go next. So for me, I really enjoy my work-life balance in my current job. With that being said, I think it really depends on what group, even within Eastman or whatever company, like your experience could be different wherever you are. I mean, that's the same for academia. You can't just broad strokes paint academia versus industry. So I would say as you're talking, networking with people, getting to know them, ask them about like how their life is, how their work life is. You may talk to people from the same company and get completely different answers. So it really just depends. Personally, I'm more on the front end type of research. When I was doing reactions, sometimes the reaction's there, so you have to be there if something happens to it. But I'm outside the lab now mostly, and my job's fairly flexible. And I still like to be on site as much as I can, but if some emergency happens where I got to go to the doctor, like it's super flexible. Another thing I've noticed around industry is this 4 9s and a 4 schedule. So pretty much everyone in Eastman Technology works like 9 hours Monday through Thursday and then half day on Friday. I don't know if I've seen other companies kind of do that too, but some don't. It really just depends.
Just to add on that, even in the early years, if you are really grinding and honing your craft in the first few years, by the time other things come in your life, hopefully you're in a position much like Erin, where she has a team and she knows exactly what she's doing. She knows exactly how to task everyone. And it becomes a little bit easier to balance life in that way. And you also feel a little bit more confident in doing so. I think there's nothing wrong jumping into a new job and giving it everything that you got and then seeing how it all shakes out. Because I think if you show up strong for when it counts, that's all that's important. If your manager and your boss know that they can count on you in that way, then that's really all that matters. But I think
love
that's a good question and also a really good thing to think about. Good advice that you got earlier as well.
Yeah, I want to say that like my first couple of years here, I wasn't as good at drawing lines and boundaries. And I just woke up one day and decided that when the gate goes down behind me, that was it for the day, unless there was an emergency. I decided to prioritize my work-life balance. And then much to what Danielle said, like my bosses just learned to trust that I would make sure that things got done. And so that's been like over years of building that trust that I can just be like, go into the woods.
Panelists, you did a phenomenal
Yeah.
job. Thank you so much for making the time to do this. This has such a huge impact on their careers and their choices.
Thanks for having us, folks.
Thanks,
It was a
everyone.
pleasure. Reach out directly in LinkedIn if you have any further questions. I'm happy to answer them.
Same.
And
Yeah,
good
same
luck,
here.
everyone.